The regular portion of the meeting is adjourned. We will now move into the public hearing that is scheduled for this evening.
Excuse me, Mr. Lorenz. I need to make a new file for the new hearing. Okay, will you just give me 2 seconds?
Certainly.
Put out, you can judge the resolution to sign.
So with that, we will move into the public hearing for CU-1-18, the conditional use, and CU-2-18, major excavation for construction and operation of the Titan well pad 6189 Bollinger Road. So with that, Mr. Sittig, who is special counsel for Municipality of Murraysville on this matter, I will turn it over to you to sort of lay the groundwork and describe what we're here for, the process, and any other items in advance so that everybody kind of understands the landscape as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lorenz. First off, we had spoken earlier, Mr. President, about your recusal from the deliberations and vote on this matter. So, Mr. Lorenz will not be participating in the deliberations.
Maybe put this on right there. Yeah.
I know better by now.
There you go, Bill.
A green button. Oh, here you go. There you go.
Start over. Mr. Lorenz is not going to participate in the deliberations or the vote on these matters that are before us, and there are 2 of them that are currently pending. There's the conditional use application that was just announced. There's also a land development application. This is just the hearing on the conditional use, so they're both pending, but we're only hearing tonight. It's the commencement of the conditional use hearing. Mr. Lorenz is not going to be participating in the vote on either of those, but he will be conducting the meetings. So moving into the conditional use process, just want to let everyone know, you may have been through some of these before, but this is the legal hearing. This is essentially the trial on this case. And the applicant has the burden. So the applicant will go first. And the applicant has the burden of establishing compliance with the criteria. Then the organization will be not much different from a trial. We're then going to have the counsel be able to ask questions of their witnesses. And then we're going to have any parties that are identified and recognized to the proceedings be able to also cross-examine. Once the applicant gets its case in, then we'll have the parties be able to put their case in. And that will go in the same fashion. You'll put your witnesses, the parties will each put their witnesses in, and then they'll have a right for counsel to ask questions, and then we'll have cross-examination. Only then, and there are folks that are going to be here that aren't parties and aren't witnesses, only then will it be opened up. Once each case is put in, only then will it be opened up to public comment. So to the extent that there's frustration or that you're going to be sitting through extensive evenings in advance, you may be able to short circuit of that and wait till the conclusion of the proceedings if your intent is just to present comments to counsel. So what we'd like to do, I think, with that organization is to identify the parties. We have the applicant as the party, and we had one other party already. If you would identify yourself, Mr. Coker.
My name is Anton Berkovich. I'm an attorney for organization Protect PP, and we're requesting to participate tonight as an objecting party to the application.
So is there anyone else that wants to participate as a party, in effect, to be able to cross-examine any of the applicant's witnesses, to present any evidence individually? Does anyone else want to do that? And one of the things that I would like to caution is one of the rules is if you choose to do that, you have to do that up front. You can't wait midstream or you can't come in at the end. So if you actually want to be here, and again, that's different from just presenting comments at the end. If you actually want to participate as Protect PT, as indicated, please identify yourself now so that we can recognize that, and frankly, on the back end, that you can be allocated some time to present your case. Is anyone else going to be asked to participate as a party? Okay. On behalf of Protect PT, community organization, and we've all seen all of these standing cases. I don't know, does the applicant have any questions? I'd like to resolve that up front and decide who we believe is in and who is out.
Thank you, Mr. Siddick. Pierce Richardson, I'm an attorney with K&L Gates representing the applicant, Hex. We'd like Protect PT to make a showing of standing, please.
If you would, and just it's an old standard, when I get the cases that are been issued before I've been practicing, started practicing, and then I'm pretty comfortable. We're still on the old William Penn parking garage standard, so I assume that you know what we need to do, and we need some direct nexus with the site in question.
Correct, sir. We'd be relying on the standing, which you're familiar with. Any person affected by the application who makes a timely appearance, including community organizations, is allowed to participate as a party. So with that in mind, we have, if required, Protect PT members of our organization that are prepared to testify and be available for cross-examination to satisfy the standing showing.
So then if we're going to get standing via the members, then we need to establish those individual members. Can you show?
Would you like me to
I would.
list them for the record?
Well, I'd actually like to identify them, and we're starting with the proximity is where standing usually starts, proximity to the site.
Here for Protect PT today, I have Judy Kolick, Colick, lives in 282, probably say this incorrectly, Maioli Road, Export, PA. Approximately 1 mile from the proposed Titan well pad site. We have Judy and Joseph Evans, also of Export, PA. Approximately 2 miles from the proposed site. We have a Jean Martin, also of Export, PA, under 1 mile from the proposed site.
If you could, what I'm going to advise council is, based on the cases as I see them, again, when I started, most of the cases deal with being 1.5 blocks away. For whatever reason, the courts have decided this is somehow different than impacts, but generally, I think the cases, I think we're very comfortable if we have to go within 0.5 mile. And I'd like to draw the line there, but you've got to get us within 1 mile.
Well, I would disagree with your assessment of the standing standard. There isn't any set geographic requirement in the law. Anybody who wants to assert that they'd be adversely impacted by the application has standing to participate. And further, separate from the site, we have residents who live along the proposed traffic route concerning the traffic study that was done as part of this conditional use. And being that they live exactly on the traffic route, we would argue they have direct standing.
And
Protect PT members.
so could you identify, first of all, you identified your first 3 individuals were respectively 1 mile and 2 miles away. Then you identified somebody that's less than 1 mile. And who was that?
Jean Martin,
And how far does Ms. Martin live from the site?
0.9 miles.
And then you mentioned,
And she is one of the individuals who lives directly on the truck route.
and her address is?
3825 Westertown? Westertown Road,
And that is in the municipality?
Export, PA, Murraysville.
Is there any, you mentioned multiple people on the truck route, is that it?
We also have a That's all we have along the truck route today.
Mr. Richardson, if you would, just to give the applicant's position on standing, please.
It's our position under the relevant cases that the relevant geographic distance is a half mile, as you mentioned, Mr. Siddig. So we would propose that that be the standard that's applied. On the final individual that council identified as living on Weasterton, that is not on the proposed route, according to our folks. And we would like, depending on where you go, we'd like the opportunity to ask further questions if that becomes necessary.
If I may, for Protect PT, are the Wilsons here? Well, we would still assert our position for the record that we believe we can present witnesses that have standing, and based on the standard in Pennsylvania, we would again argue and note for the record there is no distance requirement, there is no geographic requirement in the municipal planning code, nor have the courts interpreted there to be one.
No, what's very clear is that we have to establish that these folks are different from the other folks in the community. They're somehow disparately impacted.
We could
Uniquely
present that with
impacted.
testimony.
And I understand what I'm going to advise council, 0.9 miles away doesn't meet that smell test. You have an argument on the truck route, which I respect, but I've also gotten a comment that it's not. So Meestertown, is that in fact on the truck route?
No, that was counsel for the applicant's correct. That was an error on my part, which I clarified in the follow-up. My apologies.
Sorry. And so do we have anyone else on the truck route?
Not at this evening's hearing, no.
I think you need to have somebody that's more directly impacted in order to participate.
We understand. We would disagree with that interpretation.
So, no, there's a burden here. We have an applicant that has to meet its, but right now we don't have, we only have one party to the application. We have the applicant. So, with that, and as I indicated, I don't know if anyone that's on TV, you need to do that promptly. You need to get in promptly. So if you have anyone else that is disparately impacted from the public at large, or you can make that argument, then we're here to listen to it. So,
Can we have a 5-minute recess?
Mr. Richardson, would you please present your case?
Thank you, Mr. Siddig. As I mentioned, my name is Pierce Richardson, representing HEX this evening. I'd like to introduce my colleague Kate Gaffner, also with K&L Gates. It's our intention tonight to present 4 witnesses to you. Ryan Daly, who's with Civil and Environmental Consultants, Brian Dilmuth, Vance Hazard, and Scott Cleveland, who are all with HEX as part of our presentation. We're going to try to be respectful of your time. We understand there's a lot of material to cover. I'm sure you've seen the 2 submissions, the applications for conditional use approval and land development plan approval. There's a lot of material to go through, and we're going to go through it as efficiently as we can. If you looked at the application binders, they're assembled so they follow the provisions of your ordinances. We've organized them by subject matter and topic. The conditional use application walks through all the conditional use requirements. And sure.
One point, ladies and gentlemen, when you're in the audience and you're talking and you're moving around, it's very difficult for the court reporter to be able to hear and take accurate notes. So I would ask that if people want or need to have discussions or communications, I certainly understand and respect that. We ask that you just please go out in the hall to do so. Thank you.
Can you let me know where I need to begin? Okay. You got the introductions that we did? Okay. The only comment I was making was there's a lot of material to go through. If you looked at the binders, they were organized by subject matter and topic. And we're going to try to take the same approach through our proceeding, just to do it in a logical fashion and try to get through it as efficiently as possible. Just to set expectations, we don't expect that we're not going to complete the whole case tonight. We're going to try to get through the 4 witnesses that we have, and then we'll be back at subsequent hearings to complete our case. So with that, I'd like to call our first witness, Ryan Daly. You prefer the witness at the lectern? Does it make a difference to you?
As long as the court reporter can hear, and as long as the camera, as you're appropriately positioned there, can see so that the exhibits can be broadcast, I don't think anybody has any problems unless anybody else wants to.
Great, and we'll proceed. Can you state your name for the record, please?
Ryan Daly, RyanDailey.
And where are you employed, Ryan?
I work for civil and environmental consultants right here in Murraysville.
And what's your position there?
I'm a project manager.
Okay. And can you describe for the council your role on this project?
As a project manager, I was responsible for day-to-day communications with HEX folks. I also oversaw compiling of the application materials as well as preparation of the DEP permits.
Okay. And have you worked with HEX on prior projects?
Yes.
We'd like to just go through your qualifications first. Can you tell us your educational background?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering degree from the Pennsylvania State University, as well as a minor certificate in watersheds and water resources.
And what's your experience in relation to energy projects?
I have 6 years working on the consulting side of oil and gas projects, everything from upstream well pad development and midstream projects like pipelines.
And what are your licensing and certifications?
I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania.
Okay. Have you been qualified previously to testify as an expert in these types of proceedings?
Yes, a minimum of 6 other projects.
Okay. So you consider yourself qualified as an expert in energy project development?
Yes.
Okay, we would move to have Mr. Daly recognized as an expert in energy project development and site planning. And we will submit his CV as an exhibit. Our plan is to submit all the exhibits at the end in one group at the end of the presentation. Mr. Daly, what was your role with respect to preparation of the conditional use application?
Like I mentioned earlier, I oversaw compiling all the information from the various consultants and submitting that application to the municipality.
Okay, and the same general role on the land development plan as well?
Yes.
Can you describe for council the existing conditions at the property, where the property is located, and what the existing conditions are?
Yes, so as mentioned, the property is located along Bollinger Road at the site of the former Kowalski strip mine. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The parcel is currently owned by Huntley Huntley, and after the strip mining operations, the site was reclaimed, is currently vegetated in meadow condition.
And the ordinance requires that a survey of oil and gas development projects meeting the requirements of the ordinance be submitted. Was that prepared and submitted?
Yes.
I'm going to walk you through the specific requirements of the site plan, which I see is now up on the screen. Does the survey show access roads, and can you describe how access will work to the site?
Yes, so if you're familiar with Bollinger Road, towards the eastern end near the intersection with Hilty Road, as you come up to the top of the hill, the access road will come off to the south and then go into the site.
Okay. The site's going to look different depending on which stage of development is at issue. Can you walk the council through the various stages of the project?
Yes, so this first plan that we have shown here represents the drilling stage. This will be the first stage of operations after the well pad has been constructed. In the center of the well pad here, this is where all the drilling equipment will be located. So depending on which well head they're drilling, this equipment could shift slightly over top of that, but this will generally be where all the drilling equipment is located. As you can see at this side of the well pad, we have this designated parking area. This is basically generally where the day-to-day employees and workers would park their vehicles. We approximate 40 spaces available during drilling operations. Along this very southeastern edge of the pad would be where all the construction trailers, a bunkhouse, and various other, storage and staging areas.
What's the overall size of the pad, Ryan?
So the pad itself is 350 feet wide and 500 feet long.
Okay. Does the zoning ordinance impose specific parking requirements?
Yes, it does.
And does the site plan satisfy those requirements?
Yes. All right, so this would represent the second stage of operations. So once they're done drilling the wells, they go back to complete the wells, also known as the fracking operations. Here, again, your wells haven't moved. They're in the same place as when they drilled them. They will have the potential for above-ground freshwater storage tank to support the completions operations. Again, we have various parking areas designated for employees to park vehicles, as well as additional staging areas for larger trucks and other materials.
And how many wells are covered by this application for this pad?
Currently 6. And then this plan represents the final stage of operations. This would be the long-term production stage. So after the wells have been drilled and completed, they hook them up to their processing units and then connect to a pipeline and put that gas to market. So, most of the well pad will be cleared out at this point. Production equipment will be located in this corner of the pad. So obviously there'll be lots of available space for vehicles as they need to for inspections and maintenance.
The next topic under the ordinance is the location of protected structures. The ordinance requires that the well pad be no closer than 750 feet from the nearest attached portion of a protected structure. Can you show us where that is on this drawing?
Yes, so this is a zoomed out view with an aerial background that basically shows the full limits of the property. The closest protected structures would be on the opposite side of Bollinger Road to the west of the site, as well as on the eastern side of Hilty Road. The 750-foot offset is represented on this figure with this orange dashed line. And as you can see, our project area is not located within that orange setback.
So the site plan shows compliance with that requirement.
Yes.
The next requirement of the ordinance is that no temporary or permanent structures, equipment, materials, or activities can be within 350 feet from the nearest attached portion of a protected structure. Can you show us where that line is?
Yes. So again, the protected structures along the western side of the site are represented with this this magenta dash line, as well as a magenta dash line on this side representing the 350-foot setback.
So the site plan shows compliance with this requirement as well.
Yes.
The next is that no permanent facility area or well pad can be within 300 feet from the nearest portion of the exterior boundary of a recreational area. How far away is the nearest recreational area?
So the nearest recreational area would be the Scouting Knob, located west of the site along Bollinger Road. And again, this is even farther zoomed out from the site, and the edge of that parcel is greater than 3,000 feet from our well site.
So the project satisfies the applicable setback requirements?
Yes.
The ordinance also requires that the project comply with the bulk regulation table in the ordinance. Does it do so?
Yes.
There's a maximum building height limitation of 40 feet in the RR district. Does this project comply?
Yes.
And the ordinance also requires that temporary buildings will be less than 40 feet high. Does this project comply?
Yes.
The subdivision and land development ordinance provides that HEX has to include final plat drawings with specific requirements. Did you prepare those plat drawings that
Yeah.
conform with the requirements?
Yes.
And those are the drawings found at tab 11 of the land development plan application?
Yes.
The SALDO also requires submission of a wetland determination report. Did you assist in the creation of that report?
Yes, CEC prepared a wetland report for this project.
Okay. Can you identify any wetlands of concern in the project area, such as streams or ponds?
Yes, so we delineated the area on the Huntley and Huntley property and identified a stream that starts in this area, flows down to the west. We also identified a pond with an adjacent wetland right below it, right near the headwaters of the stream. In addition to that, there is a 305B stream east of the site that's not shown on this figure that flows down along Hilty Road.
And how far is the project from those features?
So the closest area to the project is approximately 350 feet.
The ordinance imposes buffer and other requirements to protect wetlands. Are there any wetlands here greater than 25 acres, or 0.25 acres?
No, so the wetland shown on here is less than 1/10 of an acre.
Because if there is such a wetland, there's a 50-foot buffer requirement, correct?
Yes.
Are there any wetlands designated as exceptional value?
No.
Are there any plant or animal species listed as rare, threatened, or endangered on the PNDI report?
No.
Okay. The total disturbed area is greater than 5 acres, correct?
Yes, it's approximately 9 acres.
Were there any species of special concern or threatened or endangered wildlife near the wetland?
No.
So the project complies with the wetland buffer requirements?
Yes.
Were any state or federal permits for impacts to regulated streams or wetlands required for this project?
No.
Section 220-34 of the ordinance deals with floodplains. Is any portion of the project located in the floodplain?
No.
The ordinance also addresses steep slopes. It defines those in two ways: a slope of 25% or more over 100 feet horizontal distance, or a slope of 25% or more if the difference in elevation in the area is over 20 feet. Are there any areas that would be impacted by the project that would meet those requirements?
No.
Did the municipal engineer agree with that assessment, that there are no steep slopes within the meaning of the ordinance?
Yes.
The ordinance requires that HEX has to comply with the performance standards for oil and gas operations and other requirements. We're going to address many of those with other HEX representatives or consultants, but I'd just like to review a few with you. Subsection 8B of Section 220-31CC deals with ponds and pits. Are there any impoundments proposed for this project?
No, there are no impoundments. As I mentioned earlier, there will be an above-ground freshwater storage tank on the pad.
And that's only during the drilling and completion stages, correct?
Yes.
Not a permanent feature.
Correct.
Subsection 8G of that section deals with visual aspects of the project, and it seeks to minimize removal of trees, shrubs, protect natural resources, and minimize surface disturbances. Could you please explain the existing surface vegetation? You touched on that a little bit before.
Right. So as I mentioned, this site was previously strip mined, I believe back in the 70s, and has since been reclaimed. The area shown on this figure as this beige color represents existing meadow vegetation. The areas highlighted in green are existing wooded areas. As you can see, our project area is located primarily in existing meadow areas, with the exception of a small tree line along Bollinger Road.
Okay, so there will be some impact on that tree line?
Yes, in order to gain access to the site, there will be some impact to the trees.
Subsection 8J addresses fencing, screening, and buffering requirements. Some of those we'll also cover later. But let's focus on landscaping. Did CEC prepare a landscaping plan?
Yes, one of CEC's registered landscape architects prepared this plan for the site.
Okay. And in looking at the site design, what did you do in order to preserve existing trees and vegetation on the site?
So as I mentioned earlier, the majority of the project area is located in an area of existing meadow vegetation. So the construction of the well pad itself won't require tree clearing. However, as I mentioned, there is a small tree line along Bollinger Road. So in order to gain access off the road to the well pad, we will need to clear some trees for that. To compensate for that, we are proposing deciduous trees and shrubs near the entrance of the access road. So as you're coming along Bollinger Road, you would still see deciduous trees from both directions.
Okay. Can you describe a little bit further what the landscaping will look like once the plan is in place following construction?
Yes, so in addition to those trees along the access road, we're proposing what's essentially going to be a wall of evergreen trees along this side, as well as some evergreen trees around this side and a few to buffer or to screen the stormwater pond along that side of the well pad.
Okay. So can you describe what can be seen from Bollinger Road?
So currently, if you drive along Bollinger Road this time of year with leaf out, you can't really see much into the site because of the trees along the road. Similarly, from Hilty Road, you can't really see up the hill because of the tree cover. If you drive along in the wintertime when there are no trees, there are areas along Bollinger Road where you can look into the site. However, if you're driving along Hilty Road, because of the topography and the distance through the trees, you really can't see the site from Hilty Road any time of year.
So after completion of the development and the landscaping plan, what's going to be seen then from the roads?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're proposing deciduous trees near the access road entrance and evergreen trees along this side. So the summertime view probably won't change a whole lot. Like I said, you'll see the entrance here. However, there's still going to be a tree line here and along here that's going to prevent you from seeing into the site. And then in the wintertime, obviously when the leaves are out, you'll be able to see in from Bollinger Road. However, the evergreen trees we have proposed will provide both high-level and low-level screening of the well pad.
Right. So as I understand, the plan proposes 57 evergreens, 6 deciduous trees, and 18 shrubs. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what does the ordinance actually require?
So the ordinance requires high-level planting at 1 tree per 1,000 square feet and low-level planting at 1 shrub per 200 square feet. For a site this size, it's about 81 trees and over 400 shrubs.
Does that make sense here?
No.
And why is that, Ryan?
So in a typical land development, you would have landscape islands, you would have landscaping around a building, for instance. On this site, there's no internal features on the well pad that can get landscaped by nature. They can't have trees growing in the middle of their well pad and operate safely. So what we've taken the approach here is providing screening around the perimeter of the well pad.
We discussed with the Planning Commission a modification of your ordinance planning requirements to allow this to move forward based on what's shown on the plan. And Ryan, is it your view that what is shown on the plan, given the location, site, and topography, would serve the purposes of the ordinance requirements?
Yes.
Thank you. HEX is also required to submit a grading plan that complies with Chapter 124 of the municipality's grading and excavation ordinance. Did you assist with the completion of that plan?
Yes.
Can you describe the anticipated site grading for the project?
So for this site, we're approximating about 9,000 cubic yards of cut and fill. In terms of well pad development, that is very minimal. I've worked on other Huntley projects that have been in excess of 50,000 cubic yards. I know of other well pads in, say, Greene County or the Panhandle, West Virginia, that are upwards of 100,000 cubic yards of earthwork. So when it comes to grading on a well site, it's a very minimal amount of earthwork.
And was that one of the factors in Hex's decision to focus on this site?
Yes.
So that compared to some other projects, or in particular other well development projects, really results in less disturbance and a shorter construction period, correct?
Correct.
And is Hex also required to obtain a land operations permit from the municipality if it obtains conditional use approval?
Yes, and that would be filed after approval of this application.
Okay. And the plan also has to include an analysis of erosion and sedimentation control measures. Did you do an E&S plan for the project?
Yes, we did.
Okay, can we walk through the details of that plan?
Yep.
Okay. And first of all, this is something that's regulated extensively by the Department of Environmental Protection, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And can you explain the process for permit issuance by the DEP?
Yes, so the E&S permit for oil and gas operations is the ESCGP2. It's very similar to an MPDS permit, a lot of the same requirements. It's just specific to oil and gas. And in the case of Huntley Huntley, it gets reviewed by the DEP regional office. So like the MPDS permits, this permit includes notifications to the local municipalities and the county, completion of a PNDI search, which includes searches of threatened and endangered species databases from PA Fish and Boat Commission, DCNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Pennsylvania Game Commission. In addition to that, it requires preparation of an E&S plan, E&S report, stormwater management plan and report, and also review of mining history at the site and other geologic hazards.
And can you talk about the issues and features that the E&S plan design addresses?
Yes. So anytime you go in and construct a site, once you strip the existing vegetation off the site, you've now opened up the opportunity for increased erosion from your site. So the idea behind an E&S plan is you install BMPs to prevent that erosion and that sediment from leaving your permit boundary, so you keep it on site. So in order to do that, that usually includes installation of compost filter sock or silt fence, as well as sediment traps, erosion control blanket, that sort of thing. For this project, since we are located in the watershed of Steele's Run, which is designated high quality, we have to use what's called A-backed BMPs. So that's best available anti-degradation, best available combination of technologies, which includes...
Those are higher standards.
Correct, yes. So instead of using just standard silt fence on this site, we're required to use compost filter sock. We've also included sediment traps and sediment basins to be used during construction.
Okay. And then after site grading, there's substantial revegetation, correct?
Correct. So everything around the perimeter of the well pad that's disturbed will be revegetated to meadow in good condition.
And did CEC submit the E&S plan to the DEP as part of that application?
Yes, and that application was filed in January of 2018 and approved in June of 2018.
Okay, and then there was a modification requested by Murraysville, correct?
Yes, after meeting with the municipality, we decided that it would be best to go ahead and propose an asphalt apron at the entrance of the access road, which would be up here. Typically, that's not required off of a township road. However, in this instance, we thought it would be best to go ahead and add that. In order to do that, we had to submit a modification to our permit to update the construction plans as well as the stormwater calculations.
And that was approved by the DEP?
Yes, in October.
That permit is issued?
Yes.
You also had to do, under the ordinance, stormwater management calculations that comply with Chapter 198, as well as details of stormwater management features, including capacity. Did you assist Hex in creating this post-construction stormwater management plan?
Yes.
Okay. Can you review details of that plan?
Yes. So, like he said, there's requirements in the municipality's ordinance for post-construction stormwater management. In addition to that, as part of the ESCGP2 application, we're required to meet the requirements of Chapter 102 of the state code. Chapter 102 requires that your peak rate of runoff post-development cannot be greater than the peak rate of runoff pre-development for the 2, 10, 50, and 100-year storm events. which we have attained. The Murraysville ordinance requires post-development peak rate of runoff not be greater than pre-development peak rate of runoff for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year events. And because of where this property is located, they also require a 90% release rate, which means the post-development rates cannot be more than 90% of the pre-development rates.
So it's an improvement over existing conditions.
Correct.
And were you able to satisfy those requirements in the design?
Yes, and as part of the design, we designed 2 stormwater BMPs. One is a
BMP, just
best management practice. So the first BMP located near the access road entrance is a dry extended detention basin. This is primarily used for peak rate of runoff. It's designed to dewater between storm events. The second stormwater BMP is located on this side of the pad. This will be a wet pond BMP, so it will store a permanent pool of water here for volume control. And in addition to that, it will also provide peak rate reduction by allowing storms to route through that pond.
is there ongoing maintenance requirements for these features after construction?
Yes, so HEX will be required to annually inspect these and maintain as necessary.
The subdivision and land development ordinance also requires submission of an environmental impact study. Did you assist with preparation of that study?
Yes, we did.
Yeah. And the ordinance requires that critical areas be evaluated, including stream corridors, streams and wetlands, which we've discussed, slopes in excess of 25%, which we've discussed, Class 1 agricultural lands, highly acidic or erodible soils, and some other features. Did you identify any of these features that are required to be addressed by the report?
Yes.
Okay. And we've already talked about streams or wetlands. We've also talked about the fact that there are no slopes within the project area that meet the definition of steep slope. Are there any Class 1 agricultural lands on the property?
No, there are not.
Okay. What about potentially acidic soils? Were those addressed?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, this site was previously strip mined in the 70s and has been reclaimed. As part of our ESCGP2 permit preparation, we made contact with the New Stanton District mining office of the DEP to see what information they had on the mine and the reclamation. Their records showed that the reclamation practice for this mine was to bury any potentially acidic material deep and dark. So in this case, on this site, when we did our geotechnical borings, we drilled down 60 feet and we're still in reclaimed mine spoil soils. In which case, we believe since the site was buried, or since any potential acidic remains on this site were buried deep and dark, that they would be, fairly deep, like in the range of 60 feet or more.
Okay. What would happen if some happened to be encountered during the site development?
Right. So in the event that say the contractor digs in, they find an isolated hotspot, they would be required to test that and treat it in accordance with the DEP standards, and that is included in the ESCGP2 application.
One of the other features that has to be addressed is the potential presence of carbonate or highly fractured bedrock. Is that an issue here?
No, it's not. As I mentioned, since this site is reclaimed mine spoil and there's very minimal grading on this site, bedrock's not anticipated to be encountered.
The report also has to address aquifer recharge and discharge areas. Are those addressed?
Yes, and as part of the application, a hydrogeology report was submitted for this site.
Okay. What about, are there any areas of unique or protected vegetation or wildlife habitat?
No, and as I mentioned, since this site was previously disturbed and reclaimed, a lot of the native vegetation was removed at that point.
Does the report also address any historic, cultural, or archaeological significant areas?
Yes, it does.
Were any identified?
No.
Okay. So does the project impact any of these critical areas?
Not that we anticipate.
The subdivision ordinance also requires submission of a community impact study. Did you assist with preparation of that study?
Yes.
Did you identify recreational facilities?
Yes.
That's what we talked about already, that
Correct.
This is 3,000 feet away?
Correct.
Okay. You also identified agricultural lands,
Yes.
okay? Historic or cultural sites,
Like I said earlier, we didn't identify any sites in close proximity to the project.
Does the study also address emergency services and facilities?
Yes.
Does the project impact any of these community assets?
Not that we anticipate.
Will there be any increased use of these community assets?
Again, not that we anticipate.
Okay. Will there be any cost to the municipality to provide services due to the project?
We don't anticipate any increased cost.
And how will the project mitigate potential impact on these assets, such as community emergency services?
So HEX has developed a preparedness, prevention, and contingency plan, otherwise known as a PPC plan, as well as an emergency response plan. Both of those plans outline what the procedures would be in the event of an emergency.
And does HEX also provide first responder training?
Yes, and they've already provided trainings for adjacent municipalities in Westmoreland and Allegheny County.
And I believe we already addressed steep slopes and floodplains. One question, will any portion of the property be used for public improvements?
No.
Right. I just want to correct one thing. I did ask you whether there were specific parking requirements for oil and gas operations in the zoning ordinance.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, and I think, I don't see any in the ordinance. I think you might have been confused thinking that we were showing those, but they're not required.
Correct. I guess, yeah, as part of a typical land development application, they would be required, but the ordinance for the oil and gas operations does not require parking requirements.
Are any questions from counsel or solicitor? This witness?
As far as the pipeline, how is that access the site?
HEX is still developing their pipeline route.
Yeah, so that has not yet been identified, and once it is, we have to come back for a separate approval on that.
When you said if you find some acidic stuff from the mine, you spot check it, what do you do with it at that point? Is there a particular whatever you follow to make sure that's addressed?
Right, so there's DEP guidance on how that should be handled. The first thing they test is obviously the level of acidity. So they run pH tests on it to determine that. They also run sulfur tests. Based on the results of the sulfur test, they can then determine how much lime or existing soil should be mixed with it in order to neutralize that. And then normally once it's been neutralized, they can incorporate it into the rest of the fill on the site. And the other thing to keep in mind is because the excavations on this site are going to be so shallow, a lot of the material that's been left since the 70s has probably been weathered to where the surface material is not very acidic.
You said you've provided training, or not, there's been training provided to throughout Westmoreland County surrounding municipalities, and I may have missed that, but did you say there has been training conducted with Murraysville and surrounding fire departments?
It might make sense to hold that for one of our next witnesses who can speak more intelligently about that one.
That's fine. That's fine.
Would it be appropriate to address a question about sound mitigation to you or to another witness?
That'll be another witness.
Another question I may have missed. You talked about the location to a protected structure no closer than 750 feet. What did you say the closest one was?
To look again.
If you have a number for that, that would be helpful instead of just range it on.
So this is figure SP05 in your packet. So the closest protected structure is to the northwest of the site, I believe owned by the Living Good parcel.
Can you estimate a distance on that, Ryan?
I would estimate, being that this orange dashed line is 750 feet, We probably have another 20 feet to the edge of our permit boundary, and then I would say another 20 feet to the edge of our well pad. Just rough estimates on this figure.
Okay, no further questions. We'll go to our next witness. Thank you.
Just want to, Mr. Berkovich, I don't want to lose any opportunities if we can clarify.
Get out of your way.
Hex had previously requested Protect PT to show standing, and I had called out to the individuals here and for some names, and nobody had responded. That was a mistake. That person is here. I think just they hadn't heard us. So the council's permission, I would like to request the individuals here to update who's here on behalf of Protect PT and request respectfully a redetermination for standing.
Sure, if you could just give the facts related to the additional individuals.
So I had called out for the Wilson family, so Sandra Wilson is here, raising her hand in the crowd here. She lives 142 Silvis Road, Export PA 15637. That is along the proposed trucking route. And then also with a member of Protect PT is Lori Staten, who lives 3705 Hilty Road in Export PA, which is immediately adjacent to the Titan well pad site, the proposed site. And to assist the council with visualizing this, Protect PT does have a map that identifies where our members are located in respect to the site.
Yes, your clients may not appreciate, we're actually trying to protect their rights to the extent that they would be challenged later. So we want to give and have them put the best foot forward in terms of their position relative to be qualifying as an aggrieved party. So if you have anything more, certainly present it, because
Anything more in regards to standing?
yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, particularly the 3705 Hilty Road is, clearly, that's proximate to the site. And
Correct.
Can we verify that the Silvis Road, that is in fact part of the
Truck haul route?
Truck haul route?
That's correct.
And just roughly, Sandra Wilson, how far would she be, Mr. Berkovich?
Approximately 1.26 miles from the center of the site.
My Hex has put forth its position, and I felt really pretty comfortable that we were well outside those bounds. We want to err on giving people standing, and that's why this exercise was worth that. And with that, I believe that falls within the requirements for standing, and
Thank
would
you.
recognize this organization. So, Mr. Berkovich, ready to cross-examine?
Respectfully, I have a request.
Do we have some questions first?
Sure. This is with respect to,
Lori, I'm sorry, I'm going to watch the last name. Who's the last name, please?
Staten. Staton. Staton. A.M.
Kate Gaffner on behalf of HEX. I would just like to ask Ms. Staten just a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Is it correct that you... Could you please identify yourself for the record, please, with the full spelling of your name?
Sure. My name is Lori Statham, Laurie Statham.
Could you again list your...
should be swearing the witnesses, so.
Was Huntley's witness sworn in? So I think we should
was
do it
not.
retroactively and ask him if that all of his was, yeah.
Could you please state your address again so it's on the record, please?
3705 Hilty Road.
Is it true that you testified at the challenge to Murraysville's zoning ordinance that you were not a member of Protect PT?
At the time, I was correct.
How long have you been a member of Protect PT?
20 minutes? Sure.
Just the last question, or do you need both? How long have you been a member of Protect PT?
This evening.
Why did this change?
Because I have a concerted interest in either way this goes, that I do not spoil what is happening.
What is required to be a member of Protect PT?
Payment?
Has that payment been submitted?
Yes.
When?
Just now.
Just now? That's all. Thank you.
Is that, just before we get off that, any questions about Sandra Wilson being on the zone? Would make the same recommendation that the organization be determined at this stage to have standing and to participate as a party.
So respectfully, I'd request cross-examination, Mr. Daly.
You overstand having sworn? Yes, please. Would you please swear the witness?
I do.
Just, Mr. Daly, have all the statements you gave previously, are they true and correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly, my name is Anton Berkovich. I'm a legal counsel for Protect PT, participating today. You've already identified your name for the record. Could you identify your occupation, please?
I'm a project manager with Civil and Environmental Consultants.
And CEC for short?
Correct.
CEC's relationship to HEX, please?
We're one of their consultants. We do their site designs as well as wetland delineations and preparation of DEP permits.
And as part of your work on behalf of HEX, is Titan the only well pad that you've worked on?
No.
Approximately how many others have you worked on?
Too many. Probably, I would guess, in the range of 20, between 20 and 25.
And you've worked on specifically you've worked on ENS plans for these other well pad sites, correct?
Correct.
Have any of those other ENS plans failed?
Objection beyond the scope of direct.
That's granted.
I would, if I may respond to the objection.
We're going to keep moving. You have a chance to present your case. It's granted.
I would just, no, not my objection to not being able to respond to the objection for the record, please. Okay. Is he being instructed not to answer?
That's not my witness. The objection was granted.
Okay. And you talked about stormwater management preparations as part of this application, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. As part of that, was there been any consideration to any possible mosquito issues as a result of HEX's presence there?
No, I mean, the stormwater BMPs are similar to any other site development. They're right out of the DEP manual.
And moving on to the mine void issues. Can you explain to the council and to the members of the audience what are the dangers of there being acidic soil on the site? What could happen?
What do you mean, what could happen?
Why is acidic soil on the site a concern worth mentioning?
So typically, the concern with acidic soils is acid runoff. So when the rainwater comes in contact with it and then runs off, the pH could be altered through contact with that soil.
And if that happens, that could potentially impact water on site and nearby?
Potentially.
And potentially as a result of soil infiltrating the water, there could be an impact to health and safety of people nearby?
Again, I think that has been addressed in the hydrogeology report.
So that's a yes?
I mean, I'm not an expert on groundwater, so I would defer to that report.
The person who prepared that report here today?
No, they're not. They will be at a follow-up meeting.
What's that person's name?
Tom Walsh.
CEC employee?
Yes.
So you're not able to answer all of the questions concerning stormwater management today?
I don't believe that was a question related to stormwater management.
Okay. You mentioned any, now if I say APR for short, you know what I'm referring to?
Right, acid producing rock.
That's what we're talking about right now. You mentioned Pennsylvania DEP guidance document concerning how to handle APR on site, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Reiterate for me what that document recommends if APR is encountered on site?
I don't have it in front of me, so I would defer to that, but it's publicly available.
You've reviewed it, though?
Yes, I've submitted as part of permit applications.
Well, so you're not able to advise what specifically needs to happen if during drilling operations APR is encountered in the soil on site, is that correct?
Not during drilling operations. What I was referring to was during construction operations.
Right, but you can't tell me what DEP recommends if that happens.
So it's in that document, and as I said, I don't have the details in front of me. I do know that there is guidance on neutralizing the material and treating it as appropriate.
You don't think that's important for something you should know, given that you testified that's something that could potentially impact human health?
I mean, the guidance document exists. I didn't create it, and I'm not the one responsible for testing the material during construction.
Right, you didn't create it, nor are you familiar with what it says.
It's not what I said.
So I've asked you what's supposed to happen if APR is encountered in site. How would operators on site even determine if APR is on site or not? How would they know if it's being encountered?
So typically APR visually looks different than the surrounding materials. When they encounter that, they would test it in accordance with that document.
How does it look different?
Varies site to site. You could refer to the geotechnical report for specific details on the soils at this site.
Are you able to tell me any details about how it varies site from site? Can you give me any examples?
Not at the moment.
You don't think that's important to know, given that it could impact human health?
I think as I mentioned,
He's not the operator on the site. He's testified that what he knows about, that he's aware of the DEP guidance.
Are you aware of any plans to instruct or train contractors' employees about how to determine whether APR is on site or not?
HEX typically has construction oversight by a consultant, sometimes us, sometimes other geotechnical consultants that would be familiar with that sort of material.
Yep, no further questions.
Any redirect?
Any other questions from the board? proceed with our second witness. If he could be sworn in, please.
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Can you give your name for the, sorry. Can you give your name for the record, please?
My name's Brian Dilmuth, BrianDillEmuth.
And where are you employed, Brian?
I work for Hex.
And what is your position with Hex?
My position is regulatory advisor.
And what is your role with respect to this project?
Permitting oversight for this project.
Okay. Can you give us your educational background?
Yes, I earned my Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from Allegheny College.
And what is your professional experience?
My experience in well pad development started with the Pennsylvania DEP, where I worked for 6 years, 2 of which were with the Oil and Gas Bureau in Southwest Regional Office as a water pollution biologist too, where I reviewed environmental permits. After that, I worked for Rex Energy, another oil and gas operator in Butler County, for approximately 4.5 years, with various roles from EHS to water management and permitting. And I've been with Huntley Huntley Energy Exploration for about 2.5 years now.
Okay, so you're experienced with well pad development?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe for Council Hex's business and operations generally, just to give them a sense of the company?
Yeah, so to date, Hex has 7 well pads that have either been constructed or are currently under construction. Those well pads are located in Westmoreland and Allegheny counties. We have 2 well pads in Penn Township, Westmoreland County, 1 well pad in Upper Burrell Township, Westmoreland County, 1 well pad in Plum Borough, Allegheny County, 2 well pads in Elizabeth Township, Allegheny County, and 1 well pad in Allegheny Township, Westmoreland County.
And what is your role relating to preparation of the conditional use application that was submitted?
As mentioned before, my role is permitting oversight for Huntley Huntley.
Okay. And is that your same role during project construction and once the wells are in production?
Once construction's underway and the site's in production, my role is more in the permit compliance realm.
The ordinance requires the conditional use applications satisfy a number of requirements, and these are just pretty straightforward. I'm just going to run through them so we get them in the record. Did Hex submit 14 paper copies and 1 electronic copy of the conditional use application?
Yes, we did.
And did you pay the application fee?
Yes, we did.
And who owns the property?
As mentioned prior, Hex owns the property. A copy of the deed is in the application materials.
Okay. Did Hex submit copies of all other local, state, county, and federal permits and permit applications?
Yes, and those can be found in tab 5 of the conditional use application. Those contain all of our existing permit applications and their approvals related to this project.
Okay. And those included the stormwater management plan approvals that Mr. Daly mentioned?
Yes.
Okay. Hex also submitted a land development plan simultaneously, and did Hex also submit the required number of copies of that plan?
Yes, we did.
And paid the application fee?
Yes.
Okay. There are also some other municipal permits that Hex will need to obtain. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Can you just review those briefly?
Yeah, zoning certificates, land operations permit, stormwater management plan approval, temporary use permit, sign permit, and road occupancy permit.
Okay, so we were required to identify those in the application, and those will be obtained if conditional use approval is obtained, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any portion of the property that's proposed to be dedicated?
No, there is not.
And are any zoning variances being requested as part of this application?
No, but however, as mentioned during the introduction, Hex is seeking a modification for the landscape requirements and special waiver from the noise ordinance.
Okay. There are also general requirements under the ordinance that all conditional uses must comply with. I'd like to just walk through those with you. The ordinance requires that the project, including operations and site layout, will not be hazardous or inconvenient to the predominant character of the district or conflict with things such as normal traffic, pedestrians, and general population. Can you explain generally the anticipated impact of the project?
Yes, like any land development or construction project, there will be a temporary increase in traffic in that area. This will be covered at a later date with our traffic engineering consultant, Stahl Schaefer. And once these wells are operational, there will be very minimal to no traffic increase, and there will be no increase in population.
Okay. The other general requirement is that the project not have any buildings, walls, fences, or signs that could hinder or discourage development or use of adjacent land or buildings. Is that an issue here?
No, as Mr. Daly showed earlier, what the well site will look like once the wells are in production, no buildings, walls, fences, or signs should impact adjacent lands.
Subsection C of this requirement of the ordinance, which is section 220-30, requires that the project be harmonious with the district. And how does this project relate to the adjacent area?
Yeah, this project, as mentioned prior, is in a residential district, but part of the oil and gas recovery district as well, so our operations are consistent with allowable uses in this area.
The next requirement is that the project should not be a nuisance or objectionable to nearby dwellings by reason of vibration, noise, fumes, lights, or pollution, or be more hazardous than what's normal with respect to other uses in the area. We'll address those with our other consultants who have specific expertise on those topics. You stated that HEX intends to obtain a land operations permit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that we'll comply with that ordinance.
Yes, it will.
Any questions from council?
Not at this point.
I have a quick one. So just to be clear, another witness is going to talk about the exceptions to the landscape requirements in the noise ordinance?
We talked about the landscape requirements with Mr. Daly, but the noise will be covered by a different witness, correct?
Thank you.
Mr. Berkovich?
Brian, you mentioned 7 other well pads, is that correct?
That is correct.
Total or regionally?
A total.
Do they have names associated with them?
Yes, they do.
What are their names?
The Poseidon well pad, the Poseidon well pad, the Zeus well pad, the Midas well pad, the Apollo B well pad, the Plutus well pad, the Porter well pad, and this Titan well pad.
Do any of the well pads you just identified have any current outstanding violations?
Objection.
Yeah, I think he's got to answer. I think he opened the door to these other pads.
Okay, in addition to the Gaia well.
He's opened they've opened the line of questioning about the other pads. I believe he's allowed to ask about them. Yeah, especially because his area of expertise is compliance, so.
If I could, we have another witness who'd be better to respond to that question. Who will be testifying tonight?
Could you identify him for me?
Yeah. Scott Cleveland.
Environmental health, safety, regulatory director. That's all in charge of compliance.
You're familiar with those pads? I'll hold the question. You familiar with a recent allegation of water contamination at a Huntley Huntley well pad in Allegheny County?
We could hold for our other witness.
All right, I will hold the question. That's my questions at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I do.
Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Vance Hazard, VanceHazzard.
And where are you employed, Vance?
I work for HEX.
And what's your position?
My title is Vice President of Operations.
Okay. And what's your role with respect to this project?
I look after all operations, responsible for all operations for drilling, completion, and production.
Okay. And what's your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science of Petroleum Engineering from the Colorado School of Mines.
And what's your experience in well pad development and operation?
I have 29 years of oil and gas operations, both on the exploration side and on the development side in multiple states. Numerous different shale plays, and I've been on the development side in all phases of development.
And what was your role in preparation of the conditional use application?
I had an advisory role over the decision-making on the final steps of what was in the package.
Okay. And can you give the board a little more detail about your role during project construction and operation?
Sure. So the teams that report up through me, and my responsibility is for project construction, the drilling operations, the completion operations, and then the long-term production operations.
So all phases?
All phases, okay. Yes.
The zoning ordinance imposes a number of performance standards that HEX has to comply with. We covered many of these with Mr. Daly, but there are a few I'd like to cover with you. One is hours of operation. Can you review for the council what the proposed hours of operation are?
Sure. With the exception of drilling and completion, our project hours will be Monday through Saturday, 7 to 9 p.m.
And can I just start, is everyone on the board familiar with the term completions? Okay, just make sure.
And then during after the production is, or the construction project is over, the drilling and completion operations will be 24 hours a day.
Okay. The ordinance requires that HEX provide notice to landowners within 2,500 feet of the project at least 30 days before initiating any activity. Does HEX intend to comply with that requirement?
Yes, we do.
And HEX is also required to notify the emergency management coordinator, the zoning officer, and the municipal engineer at least 90 days before startup, abandonment, or shutdown of the well site. Do you intend to provide those notices?
Yes, we do.
Can you describe your normal notification process with municipalities?
So as we get closer to the startup of the project, we'll let the township know and all the different emergency coordinators know about the project. As the construction activities begin and we get closer to having a pad site that you can drive up onto, we typically invite out the first responders for a visit. And then as we get ready for drilling and then also production operations, we typically invite the first responders back out on site.
And the zoning ordinance requires that a Murraysville representative be permitted to inspect the property to ensure compliance with the ordinance requirements. Do you intend to authorize those inspections?
Yes, we do. HEX respectfully requests that the municipality provide HEX with advance notice of that visit so that we can have a representative there to explain operations.
And does that also relate to safety requirements?
Yes, typically that's an on-site orientation and also to help sometimes assist with the correct personal protective equipment.
Okay. And we've mentioned this briefly before, but does HEX provide first responder training?
Yes, for the last 2 years, we've had annual first responder trainings around the municipalities. I think the question earlier was, had anybody from Murraysville been there? I cannot speak to that tonight. I know that our invite list has been fairly widespread. So we do intend to do that every year, and we'll ensure that that is done before we start our operations here.
So that's done on a kind of regional basis and all the municipalities in?
Yeah, okay. Allegheny and Westmoreland County.
And you said that is done on an annual basis and will be done on an annual basis?
Yes.
Okay. Some other specific requirements of the ordinance. Does HEX intend to burn any brush or trees on the site?
No.
The ordinance has fencing requirements. We talked about the landscape plan with Mr. Daly, but let's talk about other aspects of screening and fencing. The ordinance does not require chain link security fence if there is 24/7 on-site security during drilling or re-drilling operations. Do you intend to use 24/7 security?
Yes, during the drilling and completion phase of this project, we'll have 24/7 security.
Okay. And after completion, then, how is security provided to the site?
We'll install a 6-foot chain link fence that will go around the perimeter of the well pad as well as the stormwater basins.
Okay. And so that's a fenced with a locked gate, I assume?
Yes, it will be a fence at the access point, and it'll have a combination lock on it, and we provide the first responders with that combination lock code.
And does HEX intend to comply with the municipality signage requirements for the project?
Yes, we do.
Okay. There's a section in the ordinance that addresses bunkhouses on location. How many bunkhouses do you show on the site plan and intend to have here?
We show one for the drilling and completion operations.
Okay, so that's only during drilling and completions?
Yes.
Okay. And how many folks can that accommodate?
Maximum of 6.
Okay. And what is your policy for alcohol, drugs, or firearms for anyone occupying the bunkhouse?
So at HEX, our policy is that there's no alcohol, drugs, or firearms allowed on our locations, and so that would also include the bunkhouse.
Okay. And the bunkhouse is going to require an on-lot sewage disposal system permit, correct? Do you intend to submit for that permit?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Also, the ordinance requires that the developer, in this case HEX, enter into a developer's agreement with Murraysville if it receives conditional use approval. Do you intend to enter into the developer's agreement?
Yes, we do.
There are also some performance standards that apply to all uses in all zoning districts generally. We'll just walk through those very quickly. Are any temporary buildings on the site during construction, drilling, or completion going to be equipped with fire suppression equipment?
Yes, they will.
There's a section in the ordinance that addresses the topic of vibrations. Do you anticipate any of the operations generating any vibrations that would impact other properties?
HEX doesn't anticipate any vibrations moving from the project sites to any neighboring properties. We do suggest that if any complaints about vibrations do occur, that they come in through our 24-hour hotline that allows us to quickly respond to anything that might be happening. It can alleviate the problem if there is anything.
Okay. Is any glare anticipated from the project?
No, we don't expect any glare to affect any adjacent property.
There are restrictions on lighting in the zoning ordinance. The project is exempt from the lighting requirements because you're only going to have portable temporary lighting. Can you describe the site lighting that will be on site during the development of the project?
Sure. When we're doing our early phases of our project, we'll have portable temporary lighting, and we call these light plants a lot of times for worker safety. We have these just installed during the temporary phase of the project. When we get into the production phase, there will not be a light permanently installed on the site.
So long-term, no permanent lighting?
No.
And what measures do you take to mitigate any impact from the temporary lighting during development?
So the way that these light plants are constructed, we'll have them angled down and away from neighboring properties so that they're focusing on what we're trying to do, which is improve worker safety.
And will you have temporary construction trailers on site?
Yes, we will.
And what number?
Depending on the stage of the project, we'll have up to 5 different work trailers.
And those are for the different subcontractors and other companies that are assisting with different aspects of the project?
Correct.
Okay. And how long would those be on site?
So in our application, we show that we have 6 wells being applied for. So I'll kind of give the case if we're going to drill all 6. We have not made that determination if we'll drill all 6 initially. But the trailers will be on site for during the construction phase for about 3 or 4 months, and then there may be a break in between the construction phase and when a drilling rig would show up. During the drilling activities, that would probably take about 4 to 6 months, and then there would be potentially another break before the frac fleet and the completion operation would come in, and that would be another 3 to 4 month time period. And then again, this is only if we drilled all 6 wells.
And for temporary construction trailers, the ordinance prohibits those within 25 feet of the property line of an adjacent residential property. I'm assuming they're going to be much farther away than 25 feet.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Now, the temporary construction trailers, those are different than the bunk trailer, the bunk house, correct?
That is correct.
Can you describe generally those differences?
So it would be like a work trailer that would have an office environment, but in this case, we'd also typically have a bed that the personnel that will be working there could bunk down for the night. and it would be for each of the individual trailers.
Because the 6-person bunkhouse, that's generally used by the rig crews? Is that
Right,
correct?
the rig crews is typically to keep them on site on their off hours.
But the temporary office trailers, in many cases, will have a single bunk for some, like a supervisory personnel who needs to
Right.
be on site?
Right, so at times whenever they would potentially stay over, they could sleep there.
The ordinance prohibits storage of any Class 3 materials as classified by the National Fire Protection Association in a temporary construction trailer. Will that be satisfied here?
Yes, we won't have any Class 3 material.
And you will obtain all the temporary use permits required for Murraysville for these trailers, correct?
Yes, we will.
Any questions?
Not on what necessarily has been, I'm thinking perhaps of the first speaker, but let me just ask the question. As far as the fracking fluid, does that get recycled? Is that transported away for processing, or how is it handled?
So the frac fluid will come in. We use fresh water for our frac inputs to go downhole, and then anything left over, if it's fresh water and determined to be safe, we can release that in accordance to the DP standards. When we produce the well, we have to manifest and take off all water, and sometimes that water will go to a disposal spot, and sometimes it'll be recycled for use by other parties.
If used by other parties, then it'll be transported out of that site to some other site?
That's correct.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. You mentioned during drilling and completion, your hours are 24 hours a day. I'm not sure when you say during drilling and completion, is that the first phase, or is that the first phase and then something else when you say completion, or what is that?
So when we bring a drilling rig on location, it's typically the most efficient to drill 24 hours a day so that the drilling gets accomplished as fast as possible. In the same way, when you move on to the equipment that's used for frac operations and also all the different completion equipment, we tend to do that 24 hours a day as well to expedite the time that we're there.
Okay, so when you're doing that, do I assume that with our restrictions on lighting, you said for temporary use in the early phase, how long is that? Is that for that same?
So it would be through the construction process, the drilling process, and the completion process. That first, I think it was it 9 to 15 months or so? I mean, I have the exact numbers, but in that early time when if we were to drill all 6 wells, that's when we'd have lights, but they would be turned inward, and the only place that we would have potentially any lights that would be visible from the roadway would be in the drilling. Hello? Okay. It would be in the derrick, which is the elevated portion of the drilling rig, and there would be some lights there for worker safety that we're working inside of that structure.
Okay, and one more question I have, sorry. You mentioned that for medics, there's emergency training for people throughout the year and whatever, and you weren't sure if our Medic 1 people have been trained. If they haven't been trained, and maybe I missed this, do you have plans to train them prior to all of this, or would they have to wait for one of the slots you have?
No, we'll definitely reach out to make sure that they're trained before we start construction.
Okay.
You've been able to address the light questions. You also able to address noise questions, or is that somebody else?
We're going to cover that.
We have a noise consultant. He'll testify.
Excellent, thank you.
Excuse me. You mentioned glare as sort of as a separate topic from lighting. Could you just define glare?
That comes up all the time under zoning ordinances, and there really is no good definition other than light that is annoying on another property without any kind of justification. It could otherwise be avoided. And I think the response was that the temporary lighting will be directed downward, and that's generally the approach to avoid spillage of light and glare on adjacent properties.
Okay, thank you. Also, you say your anticipated construction hours of operation, what, 7 to 9, 7 a.m., 9 p.m.?
Yes.
With the lighting, do you intend to, I mean, I understand during construction you would need that lighting to illuminate the site. However, would the lighting be reduced after hours of operation? Is that your intent?
Yes.
After 9 p.m. on
Yes, it would be.
Okay. I think that's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Hazard, you mentioned leftover water from drilling operations would be released at some other source?
I mentioned that in the frac operation, when we bring in fresh water, if there was anything that was left over, that's what I was referring to.
When you say leftover, are you referring to leftover fresh water or leftover fracking water?
Leftover fresh water.
And you testified that HEX doesn't anticipate any vibrations impacting nearby sites, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How did HEX make that determination?
Well, we've looked at our sound expert will be discussing, the noise ordinance issues and things like that, but that's the primary reason why I said that.
What about vibrations?
That's the same thing.
Do you know the name of the noise individual or the individual you have prepared to testify today for noise and vibrations?
He's not here today.
Right.
Was he asked to be here today?
No, he wasn't. We have that planned for a future session.
Regarding this conditional use application, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'd hold the question.
Just one follow-up, Vince. Has HEX ever had an issue at any other site with vibrations from your operations traveling through the ground and being discernible on an adjacent property?
No, hasn't been any complaint or issue with vibrations.
And is it the case that just doesn't happen with your operations? They just don't generate vibrations that would travel any kind of distance off the property, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, follow-up?
Just anything from?
I don't understand how you're able to make that determination if the noise consultant isn't here today. What information are you relying on to make that?
My question, if I can, was distinguishing between sound and I thought you were also addressing separately vibrations traveling through the earth.
Okay, so I understand. So you were asked by your counsel about if you're aware of any vibration complaints for other sites, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Testified that you're not aware of any?
Vibration complaints, correct.
Are you aware of any noise complaints from any of your other sites that you operate?
Yes, I am.
Objection beyond the scope of direct.
I would object to picking and choosing what is, only questions that favor Huntley and Huntley aren't within scope.
Hold on. You can respond to the exact objection, but you don't have to castigate the applicant. I believe we've crossed over, this witness mentioned that vibrations could be noise. His counsel clarified that vibration is different, but he did talk about complaints, and he's apparently aware of the noise. So whatever you know about the noise complaints, I think that's fair game.
Okay. You have familiarity with noise complaints made in regards to the Poseidon well site?
Yes, I am.
Okay, where is the Poseidon well site?
It's in Penn Township.
And approximately how many noise complaints have there been on that site?
I wouldn't have an exact number.
Again, if this is something Mr. Richardson, are you going to have a witness that's familiar with these complaints or this site?
Our sound consultant is not here. He will testify at a subsequent hearing.
Yeah, but we don't, well, whatever this witness knows about these complaints.
Right. I mean, the sound expert that will testify is the person that is also aware of these complaints that you mentioned.
You familiar? I'm going to hand you a document I brought with me today. Can you take a look at that document and look up when you're done? You recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
Okay, tell me what you recognize it as.
It looks like a map of the Poseidon location with a half-mile and 1 mile buffer circulated around it, and a plot of landowner complaints marked in red.
Is this a document that Hex has prepared previously?
This, to my knowledge, hasn't been delivered to any, it was like an internal document.
Internal to who?
Hex,
It's a Hex document, correct?
yes.
Okay. And
Do you have personal knowledge of that? Do you know this is a Hex document?
Not particularly, other than the logo, and I'm not all the way certain of that.
I'm sorry again I didn't hear your answer.
Yeah, so other than the logo and some of the fonts look familiar, but I'm not absolutely certain this is our document.
This isn't a document you would review as part of your job duties at Hex?
I mean, we look at a lot of different maps and a lot of different things.
Okay. So, I hold question. No more questions at this time.
Is that fine?
Nancy, you need a break?
Our final witness for the evening?
Yes.
And what is your name, please?
My name is Scott Cleveland, SCOTTCLEVELAND.
And you're employed by Hex?
I am.
And what is your position?
I am the Director of Environmental Health, Safety, and Regulatory.
And what was your role, or what is your role with respect to this project?
So as part of my team, it's oversight of the permitting process.
And what is your educational background?
I have a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Engineering from Wilkes University. I have a Master's of Engineering from Widener University. I'm also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania.
And Scott, what's your experience with well pad development?
So my experience, I have 3 years as a consultant prior to joining industry. And then for the last 7 years, I've been in industry in varying roles within the environmental health and safety and regulatory department.
So
and I've been with Hex since October 2018.
Okay, so 10 years total experience.
10 years.
And what is your role in preparation of the conditional use application?
So I help oversee and complete the portions that have to do with environmental health, safety, and regulatory.
And what's your role during the construction of the project and operations?
We have oversight, again, of environmental health and safety, mostly during the construction of it.
So as we discussed with Mr. Hazard, there are performance standards under the zoning ordinance that apply to all uses in all zoning districts. And there's a few that are within your area of experience would like to go through. First is there any possibility of any radioactive material on the site?
Yes, some of the rocks that produce oil and gas, as well as other subsurface rocks, contain naturally occurring radioactive material, and by drilling, we bring those to the surface.
Okay, and how is that managed?
It's managed by our waste management plan and the radiation monitoring action plan, which is in tab 9 of the exhibits.
And so how does that work in practice on the site?
So when we do have drill cuttings and completions, waste that comes to the surface, we do scan that material with a portable radiation detector to make sure that it's not elevated too far above background and able to be received by the landfills. And then, we discuss with the landfills what levels we're seeing, what levels they can accept based on their permit.
And so if you do encounter material that exceeds the parameters, that has to go to a specialized facility, correct?
That's correct. If it exceeds certain criteria and we sample, we have to take it to a landfill that is permitted to accept that waste.
And what agency regulates management of that material?
That's Pennsylvania DEP, Chapter 78A, 58D, and any associated guidance documents.
Mm-hmm. There's a separate performance standard in the ordinance that requires HEX to comply with the PADEP requirements relating to water pollution. Does HEX intend to comply with those regulations?
Yes, HEX intends to comply with 78A 51.
There are a couple of other ordinance requirements we'd like to cover. One is there's a restriction in the ordinance on garbage, rubbish, and refuse. Can you explain your waste management protocols on the site?
Sure. HEX intends to manage its waste in accordance with the Murrysville Code and also with its waste management plan, and will not allow garbage, rubbish, bulky waste, or other debris to accumulate on site.
And there's no disposal on site, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how do you deal with solid waste?
Solid waste, again, is disposed of at approved waste facilities, managed per our waste management plan, and reported to the DEP on a monthly basis.
Okay, so there's no burning of any solid waste on the site?
That's correct.
Chapter 174 of the Municipalities Code imposes requirements on property maintenance. So describe generally the maintenance that will occur on the site once it's in production.
Sure. So we do semi-annual clearing of the site, the vegetation to maintain. We have our ESC GP2 site inspection requirements that occur on a weekly basis or after any significant rainfall events. We have secondary containment inspections to make sure that they're competent. We also have PPC inspections that occur. The secondary containment inspections occur on a weekly basis. PPC inspections occur on a monthly basis where we monitor to make sure we don't have any leaking equipment.
Okay, so these are ongoing site maintenance requirements.
That is correct.
Any questions from council?
As far as leaks, is there like a special camera that leaks that wouldn't be seen visibly? I'm talking about emissions, if you will.
Sure. So we have forward-looking infrared cameras, and HEX currently employs at our sites that are operating these FLIR cameras that are stationed on the site full-time that we have access to. There are also PADEP requirements to do a leak detection and repair program once when we bring our wells online, and then semi-annual after that, and to repair within the prescriptive time frame if a leak is found.
Okay, so just so I understand then, if they leak and it's 24 hours, it's monitored. Once it's found, then there's a signal given, electronic signal or a phone call or
So a leak could be seen on the camera. The alarms we have and operations can probably speak better to this than I can. But there are alarms set on the equipment that with pressure losses and things of that nature will trigger an alarm which sends out notice, or if the pressure drop is great enough, we'll shut the well in by itself.
I missed this, I'm sorry. You said that if you find any radioactive material, you have to get it to a specialized waste facility. Did you talk about how you'll actually transport that material from the site to the facility? Is there any?
Yeah, I mean, it's property placarded and manifested, and it's allowed to be on the roads and transported to those approved facilities.
And there's actually some sort of protection in the transportation?
I'm not totally aware of the transport, usually they're covered, they're in roll-off bins and covered. I'm not aware of any additional protection beyond that. Okay. I mean, generally, we're talking about radiation that is, on our bins that is barely above background locations. And to my knowledge, we haven't had to send waste to a specialized facility. Welcome.
Mr. Cleveland, you've been present for tonight's hearing for its entirety.
That's correct.
You've heard questions asked of other HECS and consulting individuals, is that?
Yes, sir.
And you've heard some deferring of some questions that you would be better able to answer?
Yes, sir.
And one of those questions I asked is, how many violations has the HECS had at its 7 well pads?
I am not aware of a total number of violations where we currently stand. It's publicly available information on the DEP's website, though.
If I told you that DEP's website's listed 187 violations, would that sound right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. And if I said that of those 187 violations, about 100 of them are currently still categorized as outstanding violations, would that sound accurate?
I would say that sounds accurate.
And are you aware of the most recent violation that's been asserted against HECS?
Could you give me some more information?
I'm just asking whether you're aware or not of it.
I would be aware of any.
What's the most recent violation that you've come across?
So yeah, I'm trying to think about which well pad site it was on.
Sure, you remember any of them? Just what's the most
Sure.
recent one that you're able to remember?
We've had a couple for sediment on roads. There's some where we had some BMP failures. Most of the violations that we have are related to erosion and sedimentation issues. Some of that is exacerbated by the amount of rains that we've received in Southwest PA, and we have a team that responds to those and works closely with the DEP to try and get those resolved. But I'll also say that some of them have been rebutted by HECS, meaning we don't believe that all asserted in our violations are accurate.
So it's an ongoing process.
It is an ongoing process. We work closely with the DEP to make sure that we try to achieve full compliance at our sites.
And you mentioned higher than usual rain activity.
Yes.
You're saying, was it fair to say, and correct me if I miscategorize it, but recently in Pennsylvania, it seems like there's been an upsurge in rain activity?
I believe last year was, if not the highest, it was very close to the highest rainfall amounts, and then we are experiencing a higher level of rain this year as well.
Do you have any reason to believe that that won't continue?
I'm not a meteorologist.
Okay. Has the fact that you believe that there seems to be a higher level of rain activity in the region affected any of the plans that HECS has for the site to address that, or has nothing changed as a result of the increased rain?
We follow PED regulations and everything that's in the BMP manuals, as would any other construction contractor.
And DEP regulations are a floor, they're a base level of protection.
There is a minimum standard, that's correct.
Nothing stopping you from going above and beyond DEP regulations, correct?
That's correct.
Which you're choosing not to?
In some instances, we have.
And is it your testimony today that in regards to responding to what you're categorizing as what you anticipate to be a continuing increase in rain event in the region, you're not doing anything to address that? You're only going for the bare minimum floor protection?
No, I don't believe that's correct. We've actually hired some additional inspectors in the field so that we can be getting to our sites more frequently. We also have contractors that support us to do these inspections so that we can try and be proactive with addressing any issues that we identify on site or the DEP identifies on site.
So the majority of your issues that you testified are ENS issues, erosion issues?
That's correct.
Sediment control?
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that increased rain events would have effect on ENS issues, generally speaking?
Yes.
And your response, HECS's response to that is more inspectors are hired?
Yeah, there have been instances at our sites where we will add additional BMPs. We have added compost filter sock in areas that was larger than that was designed 2 years ago, say, and approved. We have added features on our sites, hay bales, things like that. We have extended rock in our RCEs where we have seen some tracking out onto roads. So 2 years ago when these were designed, they were designed per DEP standards, and I wasn't around. Ryan may be able to expound if I'm speaking incorrectly about in the design, but I am aware of us adding BMPs at sites to help address the increased rainfall.
2 years ago, you started implementing these increased BMPs?
No, I don't know. Since I've been here, we have been doing that. I've been here since October of 2018.
And has there been any change to proposed ENS operations to the Titan well pad site since the original submission of conditional use application to the township?
I think Ryan or Brian might be better to answer that question.
You're not aware of any changes?
I don't recall any changes.
And are you aware, does HEX plan to have any flaring on site at Titan?
There will be, I don't know that this will be a question for me or operations. I know there's an emergency flare during drilling operations. When the site is in production, there will be no flare on the site.
Moving on, you testified a bit about radioactive materials and how HEX plans to handle them. You testified they'll be scanned with a portable handheld. Materials that are extracted would be scanned with a portable handheld scanner?
That's correct.
All materials that are extracted?
It's not a requirement, but that is something that we do. We take our Ludlam, which is the portable detector, we scan our drill cuttings before they leave the site, so multiple places around the roll-off to make sure that drill cuttings are not elevated as well.
As part of your job duties at HEX, are you familiar with a water contamination allegation in Allegheny County?
Yes, sir.
What site is that?
That is the Midas site.
And has DEP determined that water contamination has occurred at that site?
Not that I'm aware of.
And has HEX modified any of its planned construction or operating procedures for Titan that anticipates as a result of hearing about this water contamination allegation?
Not that I'm aware of.
Other questions at this time? Thank you.
Scott, the stress that the recent rainfall totals have placed on site stormwater controls, that's not unique to an oil and gas operation, is it? That's something everybody's dealing with?
No, and that's something that any construction contractor and those utilizing ENS plans, the same types of BMPs that we are using, even though this is an oil and gas site, while we've been getting these violations that are ENS, they've been, during construction, post-construction, things like that, but no, same as other construction companies and design firms face.
Can I ask another question, since they've talked about violations? I don't know all the different violations. There are probably degrees of violations, how serious they are. You mentioned there were 187 with 100 still outstanding. Is there a breakdown that you have, which ones, how serious and how not serious, or?
Yeah, so the way it works is they may identify one issue on a site. That may trigger the DEP to issue multiple violations for the one issue in different statutes. So some of the numbers are elevated because it seems like it's that many issues, but one issue may have 2, 3, 4, 5 violations associated with it. All these violations are publicly available on the DEP's website in a compliance report. So the violations that have been open, I believe there have been 2 enforcement actions last year. That was prior to my joining HEX, however.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No, I said
No, I was going to say a follow-on to what Tony asked were there any of these violations that either stopped the construction, drilling, or production? Stopped, if not permanently, but for a period of time?
The only one that I would think possibly would be the Zeus, but I don't know if it was not. Okay, so then none have stopped our activity.
Okay. You're excuse me. It was mentioned before, and I don't know if you can answer this. Local, somebody in the region, the area has an issue, and they can contact your, I think it was the 1-800 number. Mm-hmm. What is the response time to that?
So we have a 24-hour phone number, and when they are notified of something, depending on the severity, contact is made to whoever the specific personnel would be to handle that complaint. Otherwise, if it's something that doesn't require immediate follow-up, an email is sent out to a group inside HEX that kind of lists what that issue is, phone number, and we assign who should respond to that. And we typically try to respond as fast as we can especially if there are serious concerns.
So if you're able to answer with knowledge, as part of this conditional use application, you're aware that the township can impose certain conditions as part of granting it?
Is that, yes?
And you mentioned, you were asked by the council about response time to 1-800 number complaints. And, well, tell me, is HEX under any obligation to respond to those, or is that a courtesy?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I'm not our communications director who kind of handles our HEX alert system.
Would HEX be opposed to the council putting on mandatory response time to complaints from residents in the area as part of their conditions imposed on?
I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that question.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good. I just want to cover one more topic with Brian again, and then we'll be finished with our case for this evening. Brian, can you update council on HEX's plans for delivery of fresh water to the site for your completion operations?
Yes, as mentioned at prior meetings and that, obviously getting water to our site has been a question that's come up. Since those meetings, we have gotten a letter of intent with MAWC, so we're looking at getting fresh water piped by them up to our site. So still working out all the various things we have to go through, but we did get a letter of intent signed with them, so.
And is this a copy of the letter of intent?
Yes, that is.
We'll be moving to admit that as an exhibit with our other exhibits at the conclusion. So there'll be the plan is for a water line to be constructed directly to the site to serve most or all of your water needs.
Yes, that is correct, which will greatly reduce truck traffic.
Right, so this is a totally different conversation about truck traffic than what was presented to the Planning Commission.
That is correct, and I'm sure our engineering firm that we'll talk later, Stahl Schaefer, will go into it deeper in depth.
Thank you.
Just before Mr. Berkovich asks the question, are you willing to agree to that as a condition of approval? That water be piped to the site?
I don't think we can agree to that because a lot of that will be out of our hands. So if for some reason that was to get halted, we'd still have to get water to the site to be able to keep our operations going.
It's a conversation we're certainly willing to have, but we don't have a signed agreement yet, so it's not something that HEX could commit to today, but it's clearly their intention and where they want to go with this.
Berkovich?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that subject to negotiations, or is it just working through the process?
It's working through the process. Obviously, it would be a larger project, so there's a lot of things to iron out on that.
So it's a bureaucratic matter rather than a negotiated settlement?
Yes, I guess you could probably say that.
Okay.
I would characterize it as a business deal that is being put together, and they're at the letter of intent stage, the intention to move forward with a definitive agreement.
Is this with the water provider?
Yes, that's correct.
So you have the ability to get the water there. This is a matter of negotiating a deal that makes sense with a provider to get the water there.
And also timing, construction, routing, everything that comes with getting infrastructure to a place.
What happens what would the plan be if the deal doesn't go through?
We would look at other options in that area.
Do you know of any right now?
I don't have any right now.
So to get water on site right now, that's the only option?
We would, we could truck, we would find other sources that we could potentially find temporary piping or permanent piping solutions.
Thank you.
I have the fun job. If there's nothing else, I'd like to move in all of the exhibits that would have been referenced tonight. It's a long list, so bear with me. I'll go slow for you. As Exhibit 1, I would like to introduce the conditional use permit application, the original 2-binder set that was submitted by CEC. As Exhibit 2, I would like to submit the 2-binder original land development plan that was submitted by CEC. As Exhibit 3, we discussed payment. Mr. Dilmuth discussed payment, and there was on November 16th, 2018, a supplemental conditional use fee letter that we submitted. Exhibit number 4, I'd like to admit Murraysville zoning ordinance. Introduce, I'm sorry. As Exhibit 5, I would like to introduce Murraysville's subdivision and land development ordinance. As Exhibit number 6, I would like to introduce Murraysville Code Chapter 96. That's the Uniform Construction Code. As Exhibit 7, I'd like to introduce Murraysville Code Chapter 97. That's the Roads and Streets Construction Ordinance. As Exhibit 8, I would like to introduce Murraysville Code Chapter 120. That relates to garbage, rubbish, and refuse. Exhibit 9, Murraysville Code Chapter 124, grading, excavation, and filling. I'm sorry. Exhibit 10, Murraysville Code Section 157 related to sound. Exhibit 11, Murraysville Code Chapter 161 related to oil and gas exploration. Exhibit 12, Murraysville Code Chapter 174 related to property maintenance. Murraysville Code, Exhibit number 14, Murraysville Code Chapter 198, the Stormwater Management Ordinance.
Sorry, I think that was 13, or did I miss one?
13 was Murraysville Code Chapter 197, Erosion and Sediment Controls. Did I get that wrong?
I think you skipped it. So 13 is Chapter 197, Erosion and Sediment.
Yeah, 13 was missed.
And
Right.
14?
14 is Chapter 198, the Stormwater Management Ordinance. 15 is the Murraysville Oil and Gas Recovery District map. Number 16 will be Ryan Daly's CV. I have these boards. They're duplicates of the plans. Would you like them admitted separately as exhibits?
They're already contained in some of these other exhibits?
They are.
I don't believe, if we need to refer to them, we'll label them at that time and introduce them if we need to refer. We haven't referred to an exhibit yet, so they're map references. I'd say keep them out for now.
Okay. Exhibit 17 is a December 4th, 2018, December 12th, 2018, letter from Scott Hilty regarding steep slope classification.
Was that submitted to the municipality or presented tonight?
Mr. Daly referenced it when, with respect to whether or not there were steep slopes on the project. And then the final one tonight is going to be the June 18th, 2019 letter of intent that was just referenced. And that would be introduced as Exhibit 18.
Mr. Berkovich, any objections to any of the 18 exhibits?
No objections. I would just respectfully request copies of Exhibits 2, 3, 16, 17.
Okay, 1 through 18 are admitted.
I believe. Okay. Thank you.
That's it for our presentation tonight. If there are no further questions.
All right. Might as well take advantage of the time. Mr. Morrison, we were going to do this either at the beginning or the end, but why didn't we put on the record, at least from your standpoint, how we got here tonight?
Forgot about
Well, I did. Temporarily.
The Titan Well Pad Conditional Use Briefing. The file number is CU1-18, title Titan Well Pad, 6109 Bollinger Road, tax map number 49-12-00-0-007. The applicant, Huntley Huntley Energy Exploration, LLC. I'm going to read this, so it may sound like it's in the past tense because it was supposed to be read earlier. These conditional use applications involve the construction and operation of a hydraulic fracturing well pad. Sure. Where do you want me to start? This conditional use application involves the construction and operation of a hydraulic fracturing well pad for the purpose of extracting natural gas from reservoir rock located in the Marcellus Formation. The life cycle of the project includes 3 major development stages: construction, anticipated during the fall of 2019, drilling, anticipated during the fall of 2021 for a 45-day duration, completions, anticipated during the fall of 2022 for a 30-day duration, and production to be determined. Construction of the well pad will be directed by HEX's Erosion and Sedimentation Control Plan, which has been approved by PADEP and is currently authorized under an ESC GP-2. PADEP approved post-construction stormwater management plans will be govern stormwater control post-construction. After natural gas is collected during the drilling stage, HEX intends to transport the gas for off-site processing via pipeline. This application has been submitted along with a simultaneous preliminary and final land development application, and the municipality intends to run both of these applications concurrently through the review process. The municipality received these applications from CEC, Civil Environmental Consultants, on October 26, 2018, and deemed them complete under Section 22031CC of the Murraysville Zoning Ordinance on November 12, 2018. Review of all parts of the application ongoing with staff, local emergency services, and external consultants. The plans were presented to the Planning Commission. Public hearing was held on December 4th, 2018. They subsequently met on the January 15th and April 16th of 2019 and passed on to council. The Environmental Advisory Commission met on November 29th, 2018, January 29th, 2019, and passed on their comments to council. The public hearing was advertised for council on June 3rd and June 10th. Letters were sent to residents whose names appeared on the tax rolls, property owners, excuse me, on the tax rolls within 1,000 feet of the pad on June 1st.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Morrison? Okay. Council, any questions of how we got here? Planning Commission recommendation, any of that? We might as well move towards the next hearing, the next night of the hearing, and scheduling, and especially give Mr. Berkovich an idea of HEX's schedule so he can prepare for his witnesses. So, Mr. Richardson, what's the intent going forward in terms of scheduling?
Next meeting is July 10th, is that correct?
That's correct.
We have, let's see.
So you'll have witnesses to fill that evening, you anticipate?
Yeah, we've got 5 more witnesses.
Okay, so you'll not finish on the 10th?
Unlikely.
Okay. So Mr. Berkovich doesn't have to bring his witnesses
Correct.
that evening, all right? And it sounds like you anticipate getting it done with the same amount of time, probably in one session after that, if it's a similar amount?
That's my hope, yeah, the 24th.
Okay. Mr. Berkovich, do you have any scheduling issues, witness availability?
Just to confirm, the second session is planned to be July 10th.
That's correct.
7 p.m.
Yes, following the meeting, just as tonight.
And then the third session would be August?
July
24th.
And then it'll fall on the first and third Wednesday of each month.
I just wanted to mention to council, it seems like it's moving in fairly smoothly now, but because these things can get out of hand, the legislature has put limits on the amount of time that you need to accommodate both sides. So what the municipality planning code says is you only have to have a hearing every 45 days. You're having them every 2 weeks, so you're exceeding that schedule, and you have to give like amount of time to the applicant and to those opposing. So, and there's a minimum of 7 hours of total time that you have to give them. So it doesn't seem like we're running afoul of that. But just to keep in mind, if it's imposing on the business of the municipality because you're not conducting other business, you want to skip a session, or you have something else that you need to get in there, we certainly have the ability under the MPC to have 45 days between sessions. And, we're well on our way to giving the applicant the amount of hearing time that they need within that 100 days. So there's some leeway. We're off to a good start. Any other procedural matters, gentlemen, ladies?
I think with that, we will conclude.
Is there public comment for this issue?
No.
I signed up on the list at the beginning.
No, I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know if you were here, we're going to put the case in from the applicant, and then the opponents are going to put their case in, the parties, and then after the parties present their cases, then the neighbors will be able to comment on a comment period.
Wow.
Well, you asked people that,
Apparently that's going to be at some point not yet determined and yet to be enacted. We're the people who live in the community.
Okay, so what we know from tonight is that it won't be on the 10th, and it won't be on the 24th. And we'll have a better idea as we go forward.
And you can't let me give a 3-minute comment?
No, we're making a court record here, and we're going to keep organized, because what happens is when we expect there to be an appeal, that's going to be picked up cold, and somebody has to read this transcript in an order, and we're trying to keep it orderly. And so the parties are going to participate and make the record, and then all the comments from the neighbors will be handled at one time.
But there was no determination made about that until tonight. I mean, because at the beginning of the meeting, there was a sign-up list up there for people to comment on this issue.
Yes.
And that's what I marked my name down on. It was for tonight.
No, it's for this hearing.
But my name was on that list for this.
We understand.
So the hearing is being concluded for this evening, but it is being kept open, obviously, because the parties are still presenting their witnesses and testimony, and as well as the public will have their opportunity as well. Thanks, everybody, for coming out this evening. We will see you next month.